Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Karen. I am from the School of the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, a currently grad student in the ABA online master's program, and today I will be presenting to you on a summer article conducted by Ganay and Sundberg 2002. Their summary article arose from a concerning question when they were doing the research on previous studies and the topic of managing and training procedures and tacting. So we'll see what the summary article says, and hopefully you all enjoy. So as we know, in our textbook of verbal behavior, Ganay and Sundberg depict one of many important information in the textbook. The analysis of Skinner of verbal behavior suggests a functional independent of verbal operants, and that was a very big important piece for Ganay and Sundberg due to the previous studies and their concerning questions. So they wanted to evaluate whether their teaching topographies would emit managing with autistic children, especially those who are nonverbal. They can't really express themselves or show any of want or needs. A little bit of background of what Ganay and Sundberg's summary research article included was that verbal operants they were described as man's tactics, echoics, interverbals. It was also texture behavior, taking dictation, and copying text. So that all encompasses what a verbal operant is. Now going to verbal behavior, that is an alternative to our model of verbal operants. Verbal behavior also includes forms plus controlling variables, which that leads to our linguistic model. Then we have verbal behavior being complex, so you need establishing operations and a lot of motivating variables. Lastly, failure to generate research today due to behavior language controlled by linguistic model. So in Ganay and Sundberg's research, they wanted to specifically focus on the lack of research that again has not been conducted with tacting models, training procedures. So they went a little further and examined their research by adding on to what other previous research studies have been doing. So in Ganay and Sundberg's research, they focused on demand, one of their principles, and in our Skinner book, demand is defined as a verbal operant in which response is reinforced by characteristics and consequences, and it's therefore under the control of relevant conditions of deprivation or aversive stimulation. So mans are basically controlled by establishing operations. And they also pinpointed that, again, few studies have been conducted on humans with functionally independent speaker plus a listener and verbal behaviors. They also mentioned that there has been problems with other studies with maintenance and repertoires that have been acquired. As you remember me mentioning, Ganay and Sundberg concerning questions arose due to previous studies. One big contributor to their extended research study was a study conducted in 1985 by Lamar and Holland. Their research assessed the functionally independent of MANT and TACs with nursery schools. So again, when they were conducting the research, a lot of concerning questions arose, some which are here. For example, number one is wasn't necessary to conduct training only in the natural environment. Number two, to what extent MANT training procedures allow experimenter to control topographics. And the last one was, can managing for a variety of missing items or events be trained? So those three questions were the ones concerning, again, following from Lamar and Holland 1985 research study. And Ganay and Sundberg's 2002 study, their subject and setting are described here. So So they had 2 deaf students, one male, one female. They were 16 and 17 years old. They were both in a day training program, and they were extremely low when it came to manding or just naming or labeling any wants or needs. Their manding was used in, their manding behavior was more of a stereotypic response, not more of a verbal, and it was their stereotypic response was controlled by reinforcers. Was not controlled by reinforcers because of the timing that the subject 1 and subject 2 presented their mans. Meaning with the timing that they were there throughout the whole day, so they didn't specifically have a certain time of when the behavior kind of occurred, if you will. In their experiment, the experimenter controlled all primary observations. There were 2 staff members, but they only served as a reliability observer. They also conducted pre-training observations that were kind of the baseline of their research. The correct response with the research was made during the 10-second period. So whenever they placed their EO or their motivation or their SD, the subject 1 and subject 2 had to respond within their 10-second period. The 10-second manned observation began once the subject 1 or subject 2 knew that their missing item was in need. One subject was for each chain, and an incorrect response was not scored. So for the design, they used a multi-element design. Again, the baseline was across subjects and behaviors. The subject 1 received training sooner than subject 2. Their baseline consisted of manned probes to complete the chain, and they manually signed specific SD. So an example here, we have the soup chain where they told the subject to make the soup, and then they verbally told them to start. Some assistant again was giving them to actually start due to their characteristic. The training consisted of, again, the student was told to man within the 10-second period per probe time, and if the subject 1 or subject 2 did not get a correct response, then training was implemented immediately. They use 2 different prompts. So they use imitative prompt procedure and tagged prompt procedure, So these 2 were different when it came to their data and research and observations and all of that good stuff. The results consisted of few mans occurred during the baseline procedures. Correct response occurred after training was implemented. The correct tags were made 3 out of 4 times without prompting under the tagged probed program. Only 1 man was correct during baseline. Generalizations, of course, occurred after training for all mans. However, both prompts produced similar results. Their conclusion was that manding for missing items can be trained using a structured procedure. It's important to teach mans at specific times. So like I mentioned before, subject 1 and subject 2 stereotypic behavior response was not reinforced before their observation was conducted due to timing. So manned at specific time for them was crucial, specifically again taking into consideration the characteristics of having extremely low manned behavior, being deaf. That was a really big contributor to their observations. In the direct man training, it was definitely necessary for responses to be present, and functionally independent interpretation was necessary. Indicators, of course, were affected by the establishing operations and the baseline. Both procedures were equally affected, however, so they found that imitative and tagged prompt procedures were both effective, and there was 100% for match responses maintained with a follow-up of 4 months after. So once their research was done, they went back ahead to their setting and location to follow up for subject 1 and subject 2, and they found that there were 100% maintenance after 4 months. Yeah, and here we have the references used for the presentation today. So we have our textbook, we have Vinay and Sundberg teaching maths by manipulating the condition establishing operations, and Lamari and Holland 1985 reference. And thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned something today. If there are any questions, now is the time to ask.